Hello, today is the 15th day of April 2022. My name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is Discerning What is True. I'm on Facebook and I'm also on YouTube. Again, it's www Discerning What is True. I wanted to talk to you about lawyers themselves. That is what they do. They choose to deceive you in many, many ways. Some of this information that I've known, some of it is from others, such as KL. Some of it's from actually Crow 777. So this is not all my material. So I just want to make sure you know that. So I'm speaking to you about what I see is a big issue in this country, because laws themselves prevent freedom. You can sum it up that way. Uh, and you can also say this: lawyers choose to. They're the ones who create laws to make you criminals. And the reality simply is they are the criminals. They are the criminals. And I get angry when I see what goes on. I recall a episode that took place probably 4 years ago, maybe yeah, probably 4 years ago, maybe in that front time frame. I made an appointment to see a lawyer. It was to do with some issues, and I chose to be there on time. In fact, I was there 15 minutes early. And there was just a lawyer there. He was in his office, and then there was a secretary there. So I waited and waited and waited. And I knew that basically I was not going to hire this guy at all. And it already made up my mind as I heard him in a conversation talking about something to do with his internet service, I guess either there at work or either at home. I don't recall. And that's not important. What he did was he treated me very rudely, and I'm not going to take that shit. And so I'm there on time and been there before time. And so he finally gets off the phone and greets me. And I tell him what he is. He says, "Sir, I've been here for the last 45 minutes or 30 minutes of my time waiting for you. I don't need your services. Okay. You've already choose that." And he had a flippant attitude, simply is, "So be it." I said, "Yeah, the hell with you." So my point simply is this is a type of people. They think they're better than you, but they actually are far lower than you because they live in a make-believe world and create lies to deceive people. And so I'm going to share with you some information that I'm learning and understanding. In reality, in my what I've studied from the informer, who was from North Carolina, who's passed away. I read a couple of his books, and we've never been free. Basically, we had 6 or 7 years of freedom, and that was basically during the Articles of Confederation. And the whole idea was simply it was to get us into a war. But I'm not going to go from there. I want to start. I'm just giving you the groundwork here, but what I want to share with you simply is that this all took place right before the war. And let me explain how this works, folks. The whole idea is that the United States fought in a war. And it's my determination we didn't win. But we had actually set a treaty agreement with the French. John Jay was there, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. So there's three men, important number again to understand what's going on, who went to France. And what took place was that there really wasn't anything going on basically with what we say settle the issue. And so the United States at that point owed approximately $6 million to France for their services during the war, with their soldiers coming here and fighting and and fighting against the British with their help. And so what transpired was when this whole thing got around to the point a little later, a few years later, France basically didn't want anything to do with it because Great Britain, England got involved. And suddenly it was $18 million, and it was due in 7 years. And I think that year was 1789. And the United States came back to them knowing they couldn't pay it. and said, "We would like to, you know, what can we do about this whole situation since we're going to have to pay it?" I said, "Yes, fine. We can forgive you for this. We will just simply give you a 70 years deal." And these are critical for you to understand because these 70 years are what really shows its thumb. It stands out like a sore thumb because in 1859, those 70 years were up. And at that time, it was far more money. It was close to $90 million to owe to these the British. They're actually they're bankers because bankers rule countries. Okay, and eventually that's no longer they're no longer any countries anyway. But here's the point. So Lincoln simply can't do anything about it. He says, basically the whole reason why the South separated was nothing to do with slavery. It was nothing to do with state right. It's all about money. Hello, everything's about money. So the South said, no, we're not gonna pay $90 million. We're not gonna help you because at that point the South was the juggernaut of the country. It actually was the economic power, and this was what Lincoln was saying, fighting for the Union. He was basically wanting the Union to pay for everything, and he was going to force the South. Why didn't the South simply, as it said, seceded? Didn't they have the right to secede? As John Calhoun said, which is reality, is true. The states did make up the central power. They did agree with this, so to speak. Now they're saying simply is, and you'll notice that the change will take place as 1871 takes place. But stick with this. So Lincoln simply was going to say, "Oh, we're going to have to fight, get a war, and get involved in this thing to collect it, so to speak." And then the South said, "No, we're not going to do this." So if they had the right to secede, why didn't they simply leave and become their own country? Which is why I feel is simply that's their prerogative. But that was not the way Lincoln looked at it, and he baited the state of South Carolina because simply as he was off the coast, we knew this. A little bit of known history going on at Fort Sumter, and eventually the governor decided to attack since now we're at war. But it's an excuse simply saying that it's always the South's fault. No. Why should the South have had to pay for all these quote unquote debts? And actually there were other states that actually did not agree with that too, up north. So, this just wasn't a Southern thing here. So, but anyway, the point simply goes on. And at that point, simply say, give him a stretch another 70 years. Interesting, the number 7 is important here too. So what transpires is that 7 times 10 is 70 years. And so at that point, the whole deal simply is you're going to see this. We like to have, if based upon what you're going to take us 70 years, we like to have the government buildings. In other words, we want to own them. So you have to have collateral, folks. You have to have collateral. That's the way it works. And so what happened was simply they took all the government buildings. That was now the collateral of the United States to the paying the eventually their debt. Well, that didn't take place until 1929. If you're well aware of what's happened then, simply is, the whole thing with the stock market crashed. And it was a major red flag. And again, the United States could not quote unquote pay its debts. So at that point, simply is that Herbert Hoover would not go along with it. As far as I know, he did not want that on his watch. I'm not saying he was a great guy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying simply is that he didn't want that on his record, is what I'm guessing. So Hoover said no. And so that's fine. Within the few days of Franklin Roosevelt comes in, he declares an emergency. He declares emergency, and you'll see this in his speech. He's a banker's friend. He's been involved in the government already. He's involved with the secretary. I think he's in part of the Department of the Navy, as well as I recognize him back in the 1900s, early 1900s. I can't give you the year. I'm assuming it probably was under the Wilson administration, but Woodrow Wilson was he was a pretty dirty rat himself. He's the one who created all this stuff. So what took place simply those 3 banking days simply was that the United States lost this. We became the collateral. That's why the birth certificates are involved. That is why simply is that people had to surrender their gold and silver, mainly their gold, not the silver at that point. And they were basically threatened if they didn't give their gold, they'd be thrown in prison. Well, how do the United States know they had gold? They didn't. It was a threat, another red flag. If that takes place, folks, that tells you what kind of monkeys you're dealing with. You see, and so what transpired was that he got that gold, paid him $25 an ounce of that gold, and then sold it, what I understand, to the bankers later on for $35 an hour, $35 an ounce. So there's a $10 increase here. So you're talking roughly probably 35% profit margin here to the bankers, which the bankers are the Federal Reserve, and they all are private bankers. The other thing that occurred was simply is that the other smaller banks, the banks that really didn't see what was going on, didn't want to be a part of this whole deal. They decided that the government decided with the bankers, nope, they're not going to play ball with us anymore. We want them gone, and so they're gone. And we also have what we call the silver certificates and the gold certificates, which were tied in because basically the gold and silver were pegged and they were in the bank. And we used this particular type of paper money to give support to simply as our money was supported by silver and gold. And many banks had runs. In fact, part of the whole thing that took place in 29 was a premeditated to destroy Knickerbocker Bank in New York and set it off. And next thing you know, they had to close their doors. And then that set an escalation. And this was what they wanted. This is the whole thing, folks. None of this things happens by accident. Franklin Roosevelt makes that quote. Look it up. Nothing happens by accident unless we want it to happen. What a piece of dirty, rotten trash you are. Yet we put these people on pedestals as though they're some great men, and they're not. So what took place simply is he got the power at this emergency deal that he became a dictator in a lot of ways, and that his decisions were pushed. And he actually tried to force the Supreme Court. He's tried to stack them. He actually tried to stack certain people he wanted in favor. He failed, but he tried awfully hard. Since there are 9 judges, he tried to get them out or either get his people in, his patsies. Most people don't know this. And we were taught this when I was in college. I don't know if it's taught anymore. That was 40 years ago. But consider this. So the debt now is billions and billions of dollars. Okay, and we can't pay for it again, and that's fine. Your people are gonna become the collateral. That's what the bankers did, and so that's what took place in 29, and then 33 we had this. So what happened was we became the collateral. So that's the whole idea with the birth certificates. That's the whole idea simply is that you're now chattel. You're basically slaves. Now it's very clear. And there's another thing that took place early 1900s is simply as the word democracy started being taught, being pushed. So this was all to do with the deal with back in 1871, the Organic Act District of Columbia, where they set up another corporation to run the country. Okay. And that corporation eventually in 1929 failed, and they started another corporation. Okay. So with this whole deal with going on with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he himself, he had people in his family that were running in his administration. Kermit Roosevelt was to do with I think it was the Department of War or Department of State. He wanted a war with China because guess what? The Rockefellers wanted the oil in China. And we were thinking about going to war against China in order to get their oil. Now, Japan had already gone in there, you see, and they were all frustrated with that because simply they saw that was a way. Well, we're not doing what we want to. But in reality is that they set up Japan to get involved into World War II to get the United States involved in 41. We're talking about some dirty rascals here, folks. And we're talking about very small minority of people here that are involved. All your presidents come from European stock, folks. There, that's you need to understand that where that comes from. Actually, a young girl had actually about 10 or 12 years ago figured that out in her class, figured out where all these so-called presidents come from, their line or lineage, so to speak. So, in order for us to get that oil, had to bait um, Japan into the war, and one way they did that was the the Navy that was stationed in San Diego was moved conveniently to Hawaii. And it was moved to Hawaii for that it would be easier for Japan to attack. Okay, do you understand? Do you follow this? This is nothing happens by accident. This is all done on purpose. And so what transpires simply is that we come now to 1999, and Bill Clinton's in office, and we have a major emergency again. And this time they choose something else. And it isn't what we think it is because there was no war at that point. And we come to the fact that simply they started the derivatives market. That's where it was created because that dealt with the Stingle bill law, Glass-Steagall law, that one bank could not be involved in the stock market. In other words, the bankers could not be involved with that. That was a rule that was decided back in the 1930s, so to speak, Glass-Steagall. And what it meant was simply that particular law meant it kept the financial institutions like bankers out of that. So they couldn't speculate in that and make money to actually make them even more insolvent. You see what I'm saying? This is about raping the people here of America of all the land, the valuable things that are here, the minerals, for the betterment of those in the few to take. You see, and lawyers are part of that whole deal. You see, so let's. So when I'm talking about this whole thing with derivatives, is that's what's going on now. So when I talk about gold and silver, you do know that gold and silver are very precious. Why would they be backing up the silver and why would they be backing the dollar? Why have they been in other countries the same way? Well, because simply most people feel that that particular mineral, gold or silver, or rocks, mineral, I guess would be a better word. But anyway, the point simply I'm saying simply is it has value, and everybody knows it has value. You see, paper doesn't have value unless it's given protection by the gold and silver. You see, and we used to have our silver coins are all marked. They were partly 40% to the point of 1964. The quarters were eliminated. The silver was taken out of them. So if you have quarters that are back from 64 on back, they have a percentage of what we call silver in them. It's what we call junk silver. And junk silver is also in your dimes, you see, and your quarters, and your half dollars, and your dollars. That is your coin dollars at one time. And then also reality simply is that the nickel had a certain metal, which was nickel. And then you had the pennies, which were called copper. That's all changed. That took place. Those metals are no longer in any of those coins. I think they stopped minting the half dollars in 66, as well as I recollect. Don't hold me to that. So the whole idea here is that they've taken everything and given people something else that really actually has no value. And what's transpiring now simply is we're seeing this whole thing is the reckoning of all of it because the United States is going to go down economically. There's no way this country can support itself. It's now here's the key. If these people were in favor of this, they could just simply say start over, but they're not going to do that because see, this whole plan has been in session since the 1970s when Ford and I think I want to know Ford. I think Ford did go to China, and Kistner went with him, or either Kistner went by himself. And basically, what they did was eventually negotiate that China was going to be the next power economically. You have what we call traders in office. It's all about them. So you have to figure that out. But anyway, so let's go back to the whole thing with lawyers. The lawyers themselves, when you go to court, I would not suggest you do that. I would suggest it basically when they send you something, a summons that you'd be in a court, you would just simply send it and saying, basically, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to participate because they've got their straw man there. It's all in capital letters. And it says all in capital letters. It means simply is that's not your real person. That's your artificial self. And the way we write in English simply is the first letter is always capitalized and the rest of the letters are all lowercase. Same way with the last name is the first letter is capitalized and the rest are also lowercase. But they show them always on your driver's license. So what they're showing you is that it's an artificial person. The fact is simply the sad fact is that we're not responsible for those debts because that's not us. That's not the true what we call the real natural man. But back to the point simply is entering their court situation. The deal with the courts is that you have a stacked deck against you. You don't have any justice. You never will have any justice unless you know what you're doing. And 99% of the people, if not more, have no idea what's going on when they go to a court. And what they do there simply is that both lawyers, and it's a tribunal, there's three major people there. There's a clerk of court, there's the lawyers, and then there's the judge. And the judge have always been themselves in the past have been lawyers. And they just simply go to another school to become a judge and they get the respect. And why would they have to say this nonsense? You hear it in politics because you hear your honor. There's no honor in what they say. Why would they have to say that? Why would they have to say that? Because there is no honor in what they're doing. It's a joke. It's a show. But the sad part simply is that people actually suffer because of this, immensely suffer. If you choose to go into the court system, you need to have a bond. That bond is to protect you. If you do not have a bond, you're going to be in trouble because they're going to find a way to get you to plead guilty in one way or the other. And by the way, there is no such thing as innocence. There's no word in there. They don't allow that in. So you either guilty or not guilty. And the idea of not guilty is also against you because it doesn't work out the way you think it is. So innocence means simply is you're clean. You never had a problem. You shouldn't even been there. In fact, you shouldn't even be there, you see. Also something that happened with the flag. That flag changed during the Lincoln's administration because basically in 1863, Lincoln himself gave that power because he didn't have that power at that point. He gave it to the military. And so all courts at that point simply had what they had, the flag. And that flag was changed. That flag has the yellow fringe deal on the side, on part of it. Everybody thinks it's a pretty little flag. No, they're telling you by a symbol that it's not true. You have to pay attention to these things. Most of us haven't. We assume whatever is whatever. Or either there's an eagle on top of the flag, if you watch that. Okay. So what you need to understand here is that they give you symbols, but you're not aware of those symbols. What's going on? Okay. So you don't have much of a choice. And then also the jury seal here, you see the jury nullification is almost gone. When they check, when you come in and you're going to be a juror, you have to you have to vote. That is to be a citizen, such and such. So they actually check you out. In other words, if you have if you're not quote unquote open-minded or type of thing, you're not going to be allowed to be a juror. And most jurors, in the fact simply is they don't realize what's going on. Many of them suddenly have a timetable. They're not getting paid hardly anything for their worth if they're doing it. I think at one time was $20. I don't know what it is now. I can't tell you. That's probably in the 80s. So when $20 was a little bit more like $20. So I don't know what they pay them. Okay. But you will not be accepted as a juror unless you vote. So that's why when people vote, they're on that list. That's why I don't vote. It's another reason. Okay. I don't want to participate in the malarkey that goes on. So what happens is the jurors themselves are are told is guilty or not guilty, and it depends upon what type of sentence is going to be. And what happens simply is that many of them are there, and they've been there for 4 or 5 days, maybe 10 days, 20 days, such and such, and they're out of work. Now I'm sure they get paid from that missing that such and such. I'm not saying that, but the point simply is most of them are ready by a certain time period when they get it. This get it over with. And when there's someone who doesn't agree with it and says, no, I don't agree with this, which you eventually could have what they call a hang jury, is that it's hard to speak up because you got 11 people there, you got 12 people total, but one person says, I don't think he's guilty. And they're like, go on and on eventually. And to the point simply there's enormous pressure put on that person, eventually to the point they simply get a hung jury. Now, what I mean by tribunal, that goes back to Roman times. That also goes back to the military. So the court system is not what you call, it's tied in with the military. And most people are unaware of that also. Okay. And so in this whole idea, lawyers themselves are tricksters. They use a different language. Why do you think they have all these? Go get a book, get a Black's book of I guess it's some law terms, or I think it's Bouvier is another one out there. These books are 4 or 5 inches thick, and they have all the important court cases in them. Some of them, maybe not. We would call that case law in school. I was participating in being a lawyer. I was thinking about becoming a lawyer when I was a junior or senior in college. I was thinking about going there. And I come to the point simply a couple of things that really run me raw was that, that's a lot of court cases I've got to know. And you are actually memorizing why they're important, you see. And then you also, what I didn't like about the whole thing was simply, if this guy was guilty, and he became guilty, in other words, he was tried and declared guilty, why later on do these lawyers participate to get him back out? Why is there such a thing as, bailing him out? So I saw this as being somewhat, what's going on here? Okay, so that's part of the reason why I never chose to be a lawyer. I also simply told somebody, I guess I was just a very black and white person, the guy's guilty and I'm a lawyer, I'm not in it for the money. I'll tell the people here, the way I look at it, this guy's guilty. He's not worthy of such and such. So I wasn't going to make money off of that, you see, because I had a complete conviction of truth was true, and if he killed somebody, he should pay his debts. Okay, and so. But see, this whole thing is simply if everybody marvels and saying we're just like the Romans, and we are. We're like the Romans, very much so. And we're going to fall just like the Romans, you see. And I don't even know if that's even credible story sometimes. I wonder about that, just what we've been taught, you see. So what transpires simply is that we go back. And we think these words that they speak mean what we think they mean, but they're not. You would have to basically have that book with you in the court, such and such. Now, here's a question, and here's things you need to ask simply is, if you actually get yourself in court like this, for example, possibly, ask the lawyers, where is their license? No, you want to see it. You want to see their license to practice being a lawyer. And most will play games with you and this type of thing. Well, such and such. I went to law school, such and such. I'm saying, well, I don't care. You went to the chicken school, whatever. The point simply is to learn about chickens is that you claim to be a lawyer and you claim that everybody has to have license out here, which is what we are. It's a commercial law. It's a law of the sea. It's to do with that. It's not the law of the land. Then let me see your license. And you know what? They can't prove it because they don't have any license, folks. They are like, we go back, this is the whole thing. You hear this. For example, lawyers practice law. Why is the word practice there? because practice doesn't mean simply is that it's what's the word I would say? It's real. It has foundation. In fact, it's simply as almost as though the same thing as medical people, doctors say, "Oh, I have my practice." In other words, they're working with their theories about medicine, and that's to do with what they do with the drugs, and also with a lawyer, he's messing with the words, the English grammar, and he's got his own way of saying it, and you have no idea what he's talking about, and you're fooled. And so when they come to you at the last part, the other thing simply is that um, you question even the judge who they are. You ask them before anything starts because you're going to try to disembowel these guys. You're trying to wreck their train, and you ask the judge the same thing. So where is your license to practice law? Since you are a judge, and we know that simply all judges are former lawyers. And see what they do is simply is they create this whole word jargon of what they're about, which most people know that maybe now, but some maybe not. But the other thing simply is they cause harm. They cause harm to other people. They destroy people's lives. Do you understand that? They destroy people's lives. They destroy marriages. Why do we have, well, there's problem simply is a marriage license. If you're going to get married, I would suggest you never have a marriage license because what you're saying simply is that the two of you need a third party. You're asking the government or the lawyers or the state or the quote unquote church to be involved in your marriage. And what they do is simply they look at it financially. They're not interested in getting justice here. They're looking for financial benefits for themselves. They have themselves have bonds on themselves in court. They also, if you work in the penitential service, anybody who's a officer has a $500,000, if not more, of bonds for themselves to protect them for what they do to other people. In fact, if you see this, if you figured it all out, just think about it. It's all about money. It's all about commerce. It has nothing to do with justice at all. Let's go back to Harry Hotsey. Hotsey was a doctor, but not your typical doctor. He chose to have a remedy that his dad gave him. Granddad had figured out some things about how to solve cancer. And so he was helping people at his clinics. And he was basically in some ways baited into a situation that simply he was willing to give the remedy, the how to solve this whole issue with cancer from other doctors. And he said, I want to know something for sure before I do anything and giving this recipe to solve this. Are you going to use this and not charge anybody for it? And they said, no way. We're going to charge people for this, which I know what they were going to do. Probably they were never even going to offer it, or they're going to fake, or they're going to offer a fake deal with the not the real deal of this. Do you understand what kind of people we're dealing with here, folks? You know, the Bible says, from Jesus says, woe unto the lawyers. Jesus wasn't a God figure, but Jesus was an example. And we don't know if he actually existed or not. So I'm leaving that debate and I'm not going to get involved in that. But the point simply is that he is an example. And he spoke out not only against lawyers, he spoke out against religious leaders too. We have plenty of religious leaders out here too, doing the same kind of con games with people and actually destroying their souls too. So they're no better. They drank the Kool-Aid too. They believe that what they're doing is that it's godly and it's religious and they're going to go to heaven. And that's all a bunch of malarkey, you see. They'd lie to you about that. But what I'm trying to say simply is that when you go back to you deal with like a marriage or something of how you have this whole saying, two's fine, three's a crowd. Three's a crowd. When you enter into a license deal agreement with this, with even marriage or any type of thing, you're asking the state to come in and deal with a recompense of what we call a money deal. It's not about the children. It has very little to do with husband and wife. It's all about them and actually making money off that. And they have their own court system now. It's a family court system. It's with, former husband and wife and children. And now, guess what is done? Yes, that's correct. I know people who are former married, have kids, and they can't go anywhere. Their life is held down because the husband lives such and such ways, or the wife lives such and such place. And so they can only go so many miles away from each other. And they agree upon that in court. And that's the sad part. So there are people who live in certain states that don't want to live there, that want to move on with their life and can't move because the law prevents that. Because they've actually been sworn in, not sworn in, but they signed their signature, you see, and gave their authority to them. And that's part of the deal simply is that you are the authority. They are not, you see. So I don't want to, I'm going to do another series on this. This is just part of it. This would be a long time. But I included as many things I could highlight, as many I could remember up here today. But there are other issues out there that I want to share more about because, a lot to do with what I call trust. I want to deal with that issue because most people are unaware of what's going on, why we charge property tax. Again, this is all about the straw man. It's all about the birth certificate at beginning. Most people know that, and they know that now. Most, not all, but now it's simply as if you need to know what you have to understand. You're going in with a stacked deck, and you don't have a chance in many ways in trying to go into these court systems. And so when you give yourself over to these people, you're saying they're the authority. And the key is simply if you're having a common law marriage, it's between you and your wife. Period. There shouldn't be anything of that nature. And the key simply is that I remember that actually with Mr. Hauser had a interview with not an interview but a question from a guy who is in the state of I think he was in Connecticut or Massachusetts, one of those, and he claimed to be a Christian, so I don't know. But he said, my wife suddenly the last year or two has suddenly become, she wants a divorce. And he says, well, I'll be glad to give you a divorce and I'll give you such and such. She don't want that. She's been convinced by a lawyer, a swindler. And I'm not saying the guy's good or bad. That's not the point here. This is what they want to be involved, folks, because they get a piece of the pie. That's why. It would be better you draw up your own paperwork and get a divorce, so to speak. But that's before you gave your power away. Once you gave your power away as authority to them and had to give your license, you had to sign these things. Those are oaths that you said to one another. And what happens simply is this is how they fool you. And it causes enormous suffering because a lot of times something like this, he was saying, this man said, she doesn't have a job. The woman who was going to divorce him has no job. He said he was more than glad to give her 50% or whatever. In fact, he said he would give her the house, whatever. Because he knew how stinking lawyers are. Because they would destroy not only his way of trying to survive, they would definitely destroy the way of hers, because she would only get so much money, and eventually that money would run out. You see, these guys are devils. They're vultures. They don't give a damn about you. Never have. It's the love of money. It's the root of all evil. Not money, the love of it. And so these guys act like they're righteous and honorable people, and they play games as though they're some kind of, good people. And they're not good people. They're not. And you have a choice, which I'll come into this choice later on, but you have a choice to live out of the system or with the system. But Mr. Hauser, Chris Hauser, is looking at it simply as, wait a minute, you deceived me. You fucked me. You stole from me. You see, you created a Social Security trust, which they did under the Roosevelt administration, and they created a bond. They created money in your account. And they claim that basically simply they're running out of money. That's a fucking lie, folks. That's a lie. And so what takes place simply is they, oh, well, at 65, and this is what people don't know. This is really a sad situation. 65 years old, people sign over what they have millions and millions of dollars in their trust, not knowing that. Far more than that, folks. That's what became the collateral. We did. Those people that worked in the past, my parents, my grandparents didn't have a part of that, but they were given something allotted certain amount of money at that point, even though they never put anything into it. Okay. But that was a part of the whole, how they wanted to sell this system. So people are fooled at 65 years old. In fact, that's why they act so kindly to you. Oh, Mr. So-and-so, yes, we'll be glad to help you. We'll give you probably about $1,500, such and such, but that depends on what you made your last year of your deal. It had nothing to do with what you've done beforehand. So if you'd worked and been a quote unquote, made a good sizable income, but the last year is what I understand, because my mom had that situation happen to her. Oh, no, you're only going to get $800, $900 a month, such and such. And she asked twice to get more, and they did not give her any more. Well, that's what you had, ma'am. That's your last year, you see. It's all a joke, folks. These people are sick. They don't have a conscience. In fact, what you need to do is simply put on your car, get a sticker, lawyers suck. Lawyers are lower than even priests, because at least priests think they're actually saving somebody. They're not. They're stealing from you. So what they do simply is, this is all part of the whole deal with Hauser, and he's dealt with this whole thing himself. He's been involved in this since, I think, 2015 to 2016. And that's why you need to look into land patents, owning your own land. Or if you want to, you can buy from someone else with real money. Real money is silver or gold, folks. It's not that little stuff they tell you out here, this Bitcoin. That's a fucking lie too. Why? Why would it be introduced here in the last 10 or 15 years? That's a red flag, folks. If it's tried and true, it's been going on for thousands of years. Gold and silver are important. Why? And you don't own it. Do you get it? You don't have it in your hands. If you don't have it in your hands, you don't own it. Ask the people in Russia what took place. Ask them, since this whole thing took place with Ukraine. That's right. They lost it all. They didn't get anything. There's also a story, simply as a dude with a man who simply forgot his password and couldn't remember it. And he only had 3 chances, and he failed at 3 times. And they took it all. Now, come on, folks, wake up. These guys are shysters. These people are liars. They steal from you. Why would you trust them? In fact, you should actually, in some ways, write a little article in the paper if they'll publish it and claim and share what these people do. I might have to do that myself. You know what? These people are awful. I felt it in my own life when I was trying to find out answers myself and how a lawyer treated me. And I talked to another particular lawyer. He charged me a couple $100. Just advice. Their advice. Man, talk about a great job. I'll give you some advice for 30 minutes or such and such. I'll be really kind to you. And then I'll charge you $200. See. Anyway, I could go on. We'll do this, but one of the books I would recommend is this particular book here, David Robinson. You can get these books at Amazon. Don't wait around, folks. Time is the essence. Okay, be the one who controls your trust. It makes you sick what you read in here. You have no idea. In fact, in one chapter here, it's really clear that, this takes place in March 9th through the 12th, 9, 10, 11, 12. There were 4 days they had bankers' holidays. And the American dream became the American nightmare. That's what it became. And, and you also have to understand simply as all caps, even with the United States. You have to also understand simply is there such a thing as registered mail and then regular mail. You have to understand such a thing such as your zip code has to do with the Army, the military. We have actually, quote unquote, we are actually, since the Lincoln administration, we're under martial law. The emergency is still going on. And so there's no law if there's martial law, is there? Think about that. Because martial law gives the power to the military. You noticed that basically after the war was declared and in 64, what's his name? The vice president Lincoln, who took over. I can't think of his name now. It's just escaped me, from Tennessee. And once he was out of office in 68, there were military courts in the South. Are you aware of that rule on things? They looked at the South as a conquered territory once the Union troops won the battle. All of us lost. It wasn't just the South, folks. All of us lost in that war. Every bit of you. North, South, West, whatever. When the South lost, it basically opened the door for centralization in federal government to the point they've never stopped. You see. And so when he's talking about here about simply the whole idea of simply American dream became the nightmare, the bankers simply have worked their ways in there, and they worked their ways to the point they buy off congressmen, they buy them off. Why do you think they spend millions and millions of dollars for a house or a House seat or a Senate seat for $200,000 a year, folks? They're bought and paid for. That's why I don't vote. Because when you vote, you're saying the system works. You're saying, I like it and it's great. When in reality, it's not good at all. And it destroys people's lives. So he dissolved Congress. In fact, I'll get you another little story about Lincoln. Lincoln was a lawyer, folks. Everybody thinks he's such a great person. He's not. No lawyers in my thinking is simply are great. Lincoln was a lawyer for the railroads. He made money on railroads by confiscating land of other people. He worked for the railroads. Yes, that's correct. He was a scoundrel too. Everybody paints these little pictures of these people. You notice that basically, if you look at these guys, they either got money named after them, the $20 bills for such and such, Washington's the dollar bill, $5 bill, I can't remember, Jefferson, such and such. In my opinion, simply is why are they the ones always highly revered? Why are they highly revered? I also have words of thinking. Andrew Jackson, that's his name. Johnson was his name. Andrew Johnson was the president after Lincoln got killed in 1864. Sorry. Then Andrew Jackson's claim simply is he fought against the banks. I don't think so, folks. I think that's another rouge. I wonder why is his face on the $20 bill? They're telling you what they're all about. Anyway, it's approximately 50 minutes, and I said I was going to stop about 15 minutes ago. So the idea simply is to see what these people really are. You are the authority of your life. You live it. You do no harm to other people. And someone tries to harm you, you defend yourself. Okay? All right. Have a beautiful day. Take care. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye.